The rain beat against the windows of Wilson Tech Solutions like a desperate fist, matching the rhythm of Sarah Mitchell's heart as she stood in the darkened lobby, clutching a single suitcase. Mascara-stained tears tracked down her cheeks, her normally immaculate appearance now as shattered as her life. She hadn't expected anyone to be there at 11 p.m., especially not James Wilson, the quiet single father who worked in her IT department. But when he found his boss, the untouchable CEO, sobbing in the darkness, something changed between them forever. What happened next would transform both their lives in ways neither could have imagined, teaching them that sometimes family isn't what you're born into, but what you build together in the most unexpected circumstances. If you're moved by stories of unexpected kindness and second chances, please hit that like button right now. And if you want more heartwarming stories that remind us of the goodness in humanity, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's dive into this extraordinary journey of two broken people who somehow found wholeness together. Sarah Mitchell had always been the woman with all the answers. At 38, she had built Wilson Tech Solutions from the ground up, transforming it from a garage startup to a respected mid-sized tech company with over 50 employees. Her employees saw her as invincible, always perfectly dressed in designer suits, hair expertly styled, voice never wavering during board meetings. No one would have guessed that behind her confident exterior, Sarah's life was crumbling. That rainy Tuesday night marked the culmination of a year of disasters. First, her husband of 12 years, Richard, had left her for his 25-year-old yoga instructor. The divorce had been messy, with Richard's wealthy family using their connections to drag Sarah's name through the mud. Then came the investment deal that fell through, taking with it the cash reserves she'd been counting on for the company's expansion. The final blow had come that morning. Due to a clause in their prenuptial agreement and Richard's family's influence, Sarah had been evicted from her home with barely enough time to pack a suitcase. James Wilson's life couldn't have been more different from Sarah's. At 35, he had been widowed for 3 years after losing his wife, Maria, to breast cancer. Since then, he had devoted himself to raising their daughter, Emma, now 10 years old. He worked as an IT specialist at Wilson Tech, a job he was overqualified for but took because it offered the flexibility he needed as a single parent. His life was a careful balance of school drop-offs, packed lunches, homework help, and coding late into the night after Emma had gone to bed. That night, James had stayed late to fix a server issue, promising Emma's babysitter he'd be home before midnight. He was shutting down his computer when he heard something in the lobby. Thinking it might be a break-in, he cautiously investigated, only to find his boss standing there, looking utterly lost. "Ms. Mitchell?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Is everything all right?" Sarah quickly tried to compose herself, wiping away tears. "James. I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone would be here." Her voice cracked despite her efforts. "I'm fine. Just, working late." The suitcase at her feet told a different story. "You don't look fine," James said gently, his natural compassion overriding the employee-boss boundary. "Can I help somehow?" Perhaps it was his kind tone, or maybe Sarah had simply reached her breaking point, but suddenly the carefully constructed walls around her came crumbling down. "I've lost everything," she whispered, fresh tears spilling. "The house, my savings. Richard's family made sure of that. I have nowhere else to go." James Wilson had always been the kind of man who helped others without hesitation. Before he could even think about the implications, he heard himself saying words that would change both their lives. "Do you want to move in with me?" Sarah looked at him in shock. "What?" "I have a spare room," James explained, surprising himself with the offer. "It's nothing fancy, just Emma's playroom converted to a guest room, but it has a bed and a desk. You could stay until you figure things out." "I can't accept that," Sarah protested weakly. "I'm your boss. It wouldn't be appropriate." James shrugged. "Right now, you're just someone who needs help, and I have space to offer. Emma and I would be happy to have you." After exhausting all other options in her mind, no family nearby, friends who had sided with Richard in the divorce, hotels too expensive with her frozen assets, Sarah reluctantly agreed. Just for a few days, she insisted. Until I can make other arrangements. The drive to James's modest two-bedroom house in the suburbs was silent and awkward. Sarah stared out the window, wondering how her life had spiraled so dramatically that she was now accepting charity from an employee. James, meanwhile, was frantically mentally rearranging furniture and wondering how Emma would react to their unexpected guest. Emma Wilson was nothing like Sarah had imagined. In the few times James had mentioned his daughter at work, Sarah had pictured a shy, somber child, weighted down by the loss of her mother. Instead, the girl who opened the door was vibrant and curious, with dark curls framing a face full of freckles and intelligence. "Your dad's boss," Emma stated matter-of-factly, studying Sarah with unabashed interest. "He says you're super smart and run the whole company." Sarah glanced at James, surprised he'd spoken of her to his daughter. "I'm Sarah," she said, unsure how to interact with a child. "Thank you for letting me stay in your home." Emma tilted her head. "Dad says you're having a tough time." "That's okay. We had a tough time too, after Mom died. But it gets better." She said this with such simple wisdom that Sarah felt tears threatening again. James quickly jumped in. "Emma, why don't you show Ms. Mitchell?" "Sarah, please," Sarah interrupted. "Why don't you show Sarah to the guest room while I make some tea?" The guest room was small but neat, with a twin bed covered in a handmade quilt, a small desk, and a bookshelf filled with a mixture of children's books and adult novels. Evidence of its former life as a playroom remained in the colorful rug and the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. "Dad put those up when Mom was sick," Emma explained, following Sarah's gaze to the stars. "She couldn't go outside much, so he brought the stars inside for her." The simple kindness of that gesture made Sarah's throat tighten. What kind of man created stars for his dying wife? The same kind who offered shelter to a boss he barely knew, she supposed. That first night set the tone for an arrangement none of them had anticipated. Sarah lay awake long after Emma and James had gone to bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a family home, so different from her sleek, silent condo. Down the hall, James also lay awake, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake bringing his boss into their carefully balanced lives. The next morning brought the first of many adjustments. Sarah, used to waking at 5:30 a.m. for her elaborate exercise and grooming routine, was startled by the sound of cartoons and Emma's laughter at 7 a.m. When she emerged from her room, dressed impeccably as always, she found James in the kitchen, making pancakes while simultaneously helping Emma with last-minute homework and packing a lunch. "Good morning," he said, somehow flipping a pancake while checking Emma's math. "Coffee's ready. Help yourself." Sarah stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of her place in this domestic scene. "Thank you. I can call a car service to take me to the office." James looked up, surprised. "No need. We can all go together after we drop Emma at school. It's on the way." And so began Sarah Mitchell's immersion into the life of the Wilson family. That first morning in James's ancient Honda, with Emma chattering in the back seat about her science project, Sarah felt like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. How did James manage all this on his own? The logistics alone were daunting: school schedules, grocery shopping, doctor appointments, all while maintaining a full-time job. At the office, they silently agreed to maintain professional boundaries. Sarah was still the boss, James still the IT specialist. But something had shifted. Sarah found herself noticing things about James she'd overlooked before: his patience when explaining technical issues to non-tech staff, his quiet competence, the respect he commanded despite his unassuming nature. Days stretched into weeks, and Sarah's few days extended indefinitely as her legal battles with Richard continued. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, she began to integrate into the Wilson household. It started small: offering to wash dishes after dinner, then graduating to occasionally cooking meals, after some disastrous early attempts that had Emma giggling and James gallantly eating burned pasta. The most unexpected development was Sarah's growing relationship with Emma. Having never wanted children herself, Sarah was surprised by how much she enjoyed the girls' company. Emma was curious about everything, especially Sarah's work, and Sarah found herself explaining business concepts to the 10-year-old, who absorbed them with remarkable understanding. "You'd make a good teacher," James commented one evening, finding them at the kitchen table with Sarah using salt and pepper shakers to explain market positioning. "I've never had much patience," Sarah admitted. "But Emma asks good questions. Like why you don't have a husband or kids?" Emma asked innocently, making James choke on his coffee. "Emma," he admonished, but Sarah waved him off. "It's a fair question," she told Emma. "I was always focused on building my company. I thought I had to choose between success and family. But Dad has both," Emma pointed out. "He's successful at his job, and he has me." The simplicity of the child's logic gave Sarah pause. She'd always seen James as someone who had settled for less in his career to accommodate his family responsibilities. But looking at him now, tired but content, helping his daughter while excelling at work, she wondered if perhaps he was the truly successful one. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah's presence in the Wilson home became less an intrusion and more a natural part of their lives. James found himself enjoying having another adult to talk to in the evenings, someone who understood his technical jargon and shared his dry sense of humor. For her part, Sarah discovered a kind of peace in their modest home that had eluded her in her luxury condo. But their comfortable arrangement faced its first real test when Sarah's divorce was finally settled. With her finances partially restored and Richard's family's influence curtailed by a sympathetic judge, Sarah was able to look for a new place of her own. "I found an apartment," she announced over dinner one night, 4 months after she'd moved in. "It's close to the office, in that new high-rise." Emma's fork clattered to her plate. "You're leaving?" Her voice was small, and Sarah felt an unexpected pang at the hurt in the child's eyes. "I've imposed on you both for too long," Sarah said, not meeting James's gaze. "It's time I got back to my own space." Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed with suspicious redness around her eyes, James knocked on Sarah's door. "Can we talk?" Sarah had been packing her few belongings, most still in the suitcase she'd arrived with. "Of course," she said, moving some clothes to make space for him to sit on the bed. "Emma's pretty upset," James said directly. "She's gotten attached to you." Sarah felt a complicated mixture of emotions, guilt, affection, and something else she wasn't ready to name. "I've gotten attached to her too." "To both of you," she admitted. "But this was always temporary, James. You know that." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "I know that's what we said. But things change, Sarah. People change." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, her heart beating faster. "I'm saying that Emma and I have gotten used to having you here. The house feels more like a home with you in it." He took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for anything complicated. Just, don't move out because you think you should. Move out if that's what you want." Sarah sat in silence, processing his words. For so long, her decisions had been driven by what she thought was expected of her: be successful, be independent, never show weakness. Living with James and Emma had shown her another way to be strong. "I don't know what I want anymore," she confessed. "Everything I thought was important seems different now." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then take some time to figure it out. The guest room isn't going anywhere." The next day at the office brought new complications. A major investor was visiting, and as Sarah led him through the building, they encountered James fixing a computer in the marketing department. "James," Sarah acknowledged professionally, then turned to the investor. "This is James Wilson, one of our IT specialists. The investor barely glanced at James, but James noticed something in Sarah's demeanor, a slight stiffness, as if she was uncomfortable. It was the first time he'd truly felt the disparity in their positions since she'd moved in, and it left a sour taste in his mouth. That evening, James was quieter than usual, and after Emma went to bed, Sarah confronted him. "Something's bothering you." James hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Today, with that investor. I realized that at work, I'm just one of our IT specialists to you." "That's your job title," Sarah said, confused. "It is," James agreed. "But it made me wonder if that's all I am to you, an employee who happened to offer you a place to stay." The hurt in his voice made Sarah realize her mistake. "James, no. You know you're more than that to me. You and Emma, you've become important to me. More important than I expected. But you're still moving out," he pointed out. Sarah struggled to articulate her feelings. "I'm afraid of how complicated this could get." "I'm your boss, James. Is that really what's scaring you?" James asked quietly. "Or is it that you've started to care about us, and caring about people means being vulnerable?" His insight struck too close to home, and Sarah retreated behind her professional facade. "I think we both need to remember our positions, James. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary." The chill between them lasted for days, affecting not just their home life but the office atmosphere as well. Employees noticed the tension when Sarah and James were in the same room, and rumors began to circulate. It came to a head when Emma got sick at school with a high fever. The school called James, but he was at an off-site installation and unreachable. As his emergency backup, they called Sarah next. Sarah had been in the middle of a crucial meeting when her phone rang. Seeing the school's number, she immediately excused herself, a knot of fear forming in her stomach. When the school nurse explained Emma's condition, Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'll be right there," she promised, already gathering her things. Her assistant was shocked when Sarah announced she had to leave. "But the Peterson contract." "Reschedule it," Sarah ordered, already halfway out the door. "Family emergency." The phrase struck her only after she'd said it. Family. When had she started thinking of Emma as family? At the school, she found Emma curled up on a cot in the nurse's office, her normally rosy cheeks flushed with fever. The girl's face lit up when she saw Sarah. "You came," she said weakly. "Of course I came," Sarah replied, stroking Emma's hair away from her hot forehead. "Let's get you home and comfortable." After getting Emma settled at home with medicine, cool compresses, and her favorite stuffed animal, Sarah worked remotely from the living room, keeping an ear out for the sick child. When James finally got her messages and rushed home, he found Sarah sitting on Emma's bed, reading to her from "Anne of Green Gables," while the girl dozed. The sight stopped him in his tracks. Sarah, professional, polished Sarah, had kicked off her heels, tucked her legs under her, and was softly reading a children's book, one hand absently stroking Emma's hair. It was so domestic, so maternal, so unlike the boss he'd known for years. Sarah looked up when she sensed his presence, a slight blush coloring her cheeks at being caught in such an unguarded moment. "Her fever's down," she reported quietly. "The doctor said it's just a virus that needs to run its course." "You took her to the doctor?" James was stunned. Sarah had rearranged her entire day, walked out of important meetings, to care for his child. Sarah nodded. "I hope that was okay. The school couldn't reach you, and she needed to be seen." "It was more than okay," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Sarah." That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, they sat in the kitchen sharing a bottle of wine. The earlier tension between them had dissipated, replaced by a new awareness of what they meant to each other. "I cancelled the lease on the apartment," Sarah said suddenly. "If the offer to stay longer is still open." James looked at her, hope and caution warring in his expression. "What about the complications?" The fact that you're my boss. Sarah took a deep breath. I've been thinking about that. About a lot of things, actually. She twisted her wine glass nervously. What if I wasn't your boss anymore? James frowned. You're firing me? No. Sarah laughed. I'm considering stepping back from the CEO position. Moving to chairman of the board and bringing in a new CEO to handle day-to-day operations. James was stunned. But you love being CEO. The company is your life. It was, Sarah agreed. But I'm starting to think there's more to life than quarterly reports and investor meetings. She looked toward Emma's room. Today, when the school called, they referred to me as Emma's mother. I didn't correct them, James. Because for a moment, I wished it was true. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. James reached across the table and took her hand. Emma would be lucky to have you in her life. In any capacity. And what about you? Sarah asked, vulnerability written across her face. What capacity would you want me in your life? James smiled, the gentle smile that had first comforted her that rainy night months ago. I think we've been building something here, Sarah. Something neither of us planned, but something that feels right. The transition wasn't smooth or immediate. Sarah's decision to step back from the CEO role caused ripples throughout the company. Some employees were confused, others concerned about the future. The board had questions, investors needed reassurance, and through it all, Sarah maintained her composure publicly while privately experiencing moments of doubt. Am I making a mistake? She asked James late one night, after spending hours preparing for the transition. The company has been my identity for so long. It still is, James assured her. You're not abandoning it, you're evolving your relationship with it. Just like you're evolving in other areas of your life. Their personal relationship evolved gradually too. They were careful, both for Emma's sake and because neither wanted to rush into something that might not last. Their first official date was dinner at a restaurant, with Emma happily staying at a friend's house for a sleepover. This feels strange, Sarah admitted over candlelight. Going on a date with someone who's already seen me in my pajamas. Technically, they're my sister's pajamas that you borrowed, James teased. But I take your point. They talked that night, really talked, about their pasts and possible futures. James spoke about Maria, how much he had loved her, and how he had never expected to find room in his heart for someone else. Sarah shared her insecurities about motherhood, her fear of not measuring up to the memory of Emma's mother. Emma doesn't need you to replace Maria, James said gently. She just needs you to be Sarah, who helps with science projects and reads, and of Green Gables when she's sick. 6 months after that rainy night when Sarah had stood in the lobby with nowhere to go, the three of them moved into a new house, not as grand as Sarah's former home, not as modest as James's, but something that belonged to all of them. Emma had the largest say in choosing it, insisting on a backyard with a tree suitable for a swing and enough bedrooms for, when we have more kids. The statement had made both adults blush and exchange glances, but neither contradicted her. The new CEO of Wilson Tech Solutions proved capable, freeing Sarah to focus on long-term strategy while having time for school plays and family dinners. James continued in IT but accepted a promotion to department head, a position that recognized his skills without taking too much time away from home. A year to the day after Sarah had moved in with them, James proposed. Not with a grand gesture, but during a normal evening at home, Emma conspiring with him by bringing out a ring hidden in her homework folder. We're already a family, James said, kneeling beside Sarah on their living room couch. This would just make it official. Sarah, who had once defined success by the size of her company's profits, looked at the man kneeling before her and the little girl bouncing excitedly nearby. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from lonely success to belonging, from independence to interdependence, from being a boss to being part of something bigger than herself. Yes, she said simply, tears of joy replacing the tears of desperation she'd shed that night in the office. Yes to everything. Emma launched herself at both of them, creating a tangled, laughing heap on the couch. I knew you'd say yes. Dad was worried, but I told him you loved us too much to say no. When did you get so smart? Sarah asked, hugging the child who had somehow become her daughter in all but name. I've always been smart, Emma replied with the confidence of a child who knows she's loved. I get it from both my parents. The word parents made Sarah's heart swell. She caught James's eye over Emma's head and saw in his expression the same wonder she felt, wonder at how life could change so completely in such a short time, how crisis could lead to blessing, how nowhere to go could lead exactly where she was meant to be. 2 years later, the story of how they became a family was a favorite bedtime request from Emma's little brother, James Jr. Sarah would tell it as a fairy tale, the sad queen who lost her castle, the kind knight and his wise daughter who took her in, and how they built a new kingdom together, stronger than any that had come before. And they lived happily ever after, little James would ask sleepily. No, Sarah would correct gently. They lived truly ever after. With good days and hard days, with laughter and sometimes tears. But always, always together. As the years passed, Sarah occasionally thought back to that desperate night in the rain. She had thought then that she had hit rock bottom, that she had nowhere else to go. Now she understood that sometimes hitting bottom was just life's way of bouncing you in a new direction, sometimes, the best direction. And whenever new employees at Wilson Tech Solutions wondered about the company's unusual family-first policies or the special relationship between the chairman of the board and the IT director, someone would inevitably tell them the story, about the boss who had nowhere to go, and the single dad who offered his home, and how sometimes the families we choose become more precious than anything we could have planned. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of kindness and the unexpected ways that love finds us. Because in a world that can sometimes feel cold and disconnected, we all need reminders that human connection can transform even our darkest moments into the beginning of our greatest joy.